funny, the older I get, the more I realize that I just don't really like modern anime like a lot of you folks out there do. And while I have been trying to keep up on shows after they've come out, it's a lot more difficult than one might think, especially for a guy with a Crunchyroll account. So, in no particular order or anything, and with no specific numbers attached to these lists, let's go through my personal must-watch anime of 2016. Starting with number 1, Gundam Thunderbolt. Now, technically this aired the OVA itself started in 2015, but the bulk of the series came out in 2016. It was close enough to the end of the year that I would count that as a 2016 release in general. So, Gundam Thunderbolt is the story of Federation and Zeon soldiers, and it's touching on things that we saw and figured could happen in the One-Year War, but never really got into, because obviously the Gundam show budget wasn't focused on the regular soldiery. It was focused more on ace pilot Amuro Ray being super ace, kill-em-all, space-fighting dynamo. But what we have here is some of the... It's a side story, because there's no... there's no such thing as a Gundam show that takes place in the original canon that isn't a side story, basically, at this point. So it's a bunch of GM pilots, Gym pilots. I can never figure out how to pronounce that, because obviously it's just 2 letters, GM, Gundam mass-produced, but the Japanese pronounce it Gym, the English dubs fairly reliably call it GM. Whatever. Bunch of GM pilots go out and they have to clear out this zone of Zeon soldiers, as you do, clean up operations, all that stuff. One of them is a hotshot pilot who loves jazz, and that makes up the majority of the music in this show. And I think he was a jazz drummer at some point, or he might just be a real big aficionado for this. Anyway, he is assigned the prototype Gundam that they get, and kicks a whole lot of ass with it, and whatever. He's supposedly our protagonist, because he's part of the Earth Federation, but it's kind of obvious as the show goes on that he's not the greatest guy, and he's not exactly a super great person. Like, he's not a protagonist that we learn a whole ton about. The important stuff is the Zeon side. Now, here's the thing about Zeke pilots in the One-Year War. Most of the time when you see them, they don't get wounded, they just get blown up with their robots, because that's what happens when you shoot a weapon the size of a battleship at a beam rifle classed for battleships at them. Mobile suit go boom. But these are members of what's called the Walking Dead Legion. They call them Legion, Squadron, or something. Point is that these are Zeon soldiers who have had limbs removed through combat, or later on through elective surgery, so they can... And I don't want to say so they can pilot better, but this is the first time that we see cybernetics in the One-Year War, and they look like shit. They are really kludgy and clunky, and it's really interesting, because you'd expect modern sci-fi to have like this super up-to-date and super, like, oh look, it's just like a regular hand. Oh, hell no it's not, it's a stick with a manipulator on it. And it just kind of goes back and forth between the main Zeon pilot and the main Federation pilot, just kind of trading blows over it, and you kind of feel like there's more backstory here, but they only give you like this little brief snippet into the world of Gundam Thunderbolt that it inhabits around Side 4. And it's extremely good. You don't have to really know Gundam lore to watch it, I don't think. Though, obviously, as someone who knows a lot of Gundam lore, I may be biased. Further than that, it's super solid, it's beautiful, and some of the tricks that they do with the way the show is shot is really interesting from both a mecha perspective and from just a simple cinematography standpoint. So, highly recommended. 4 episode OVA. Don't know when it's coming to the States. Not telling you to pirate it, but definitely. Alright, next up on the list is a bit of a dark horse here. Tiger Mask W is a fantastic show that is based on the show Tiger Mask that came out in the 60s or 70s. And I'm I'm not what you'd call a wrestling fan. I mean, I was into it back in the 90s because everybody was into it in the 90s, of course. But, just get this a little. But what Tiger Mask does is really recapture the spirit and I wouldn't say fluidity, but definitely the style of that old style of animation. And frankly, I think it's wonderful. They do so. The two characters, the guy who is in the new Tiger Mask, and then his counterpart, who is Tiger the Dark, who is basically a black version of Tiger Mask, and like the evil version, I guess. They're their own separate characters, and they have their own separate foibles and whatnot. But at the same time, a lot of the show is heavily based in the callback to the original series, which is obviously never made it over the States. Because of course it didn't, because we never get anything good over here. But further than that, it's a really surprisingly violent, but also surprisingly, it's very much the kind of the Luke versus Darth Vader sort of vibe to it. There is the good guy who is the paragon of excellence and always does everything right, and then there's Tiger the Dark, who is just evil. He's like, by the time we see this character, he has already kind of given himself to the dark side. He throws tombstone pile drivers like it's nothing. He is already working with the bad organization. It's clear that he is ruthlessly ambitious in a way that Tiger Mask isn't. And when you finally see these two go at it, it is one of the most knockdown, drag-out things that this show has offered to date. And I also got to say that these guys bleed a lot for wrestling. I think this is the WWE. They'd have been asked to tone it down at some point, but it's just a good little story that has a lot of callbacks and otherwise to shows that have come before. And that is always worth a look in my book. Alright, next up on the list is Nanbaka, The Numbers. A show that is anything but by the numbers. Let me tell you, har har har, nobody else has made that joke yet. Confirmed for a second season already. The show starts off in a very interesting manner, like conceptually very weird and kind of wild and different from other stuff that's come before, because the characters are already in prison. This has a very strange set of sensibilities to it, in which the protagonists are all, I mean, they're not just criminals, like, oh, oops, we landed in prison. They're the kind of guys who are never going to get out of prison as long as they live, and they're in a supermax facility, which is apparently the size of Rhode Island, floating somewhere off the coast of Japan. When people say anime is weird, this is the kind of show that they mean. This is a show that is just really, really peculiar and bizarre. In the good way. Not just in, like, what the hell is wrong with these writers? Like, oh, they must have been on shrooms, lol. Whenever I hear somebody say that, it becomes abundantly clear that the speaker has never done drugs in his life. But, point being, Nanbaka is a very strange ensemble cast show with characters who don't really live in anything even remotely resembling reality, but they have this solid core of camaraderie and basic decency that makes them fun to watch, even if everything that happens is almost a parody of the kind of shonen shows that you see crop up every once in a while, like Ass Class or whatever. Hey, did you know that the people who really like Assassination Classroom really hate it when you call it Ass Class? That's funny because that's all I'll ever call it. Anyway, moving along, Nanbaka is really fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously until about, I'd say, three-quarters of the way through the show, where it does, and then, like, it takes a hit to the head and remembers, oh wait, I'm Nanbaka. Let's go back and be silly. So I'm not sure where the second season is going to take it, but if they keep being just a goofy, fun little ride, then that's going to be great. And if they decide to, like, oh, we're going to be serious and shit now, I don't know if I'm going to be into that. But, yeah, for now, it has a really solid start, and I'm interested enough to keep going with it. Well, when there's a Gundam show on TV, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to watch it, and for all of the missteps and hiccups that Iron-Blooded Orphans had, I have to say that I really like the way it turned out so far. It's kind of Saturday morning cartoon Gundam, but they don't really pull that many punches, and now with the second season, and obviously I can't say all that much about it because it's a spoiler for a show that is legitimately quite good and one that I continue to enjoy. I was kind of shaky on it at first because I wasn't really crazy about the designs, and the universe felt really dirty and dingy and lived in, which isn't really something that Gundam does very often. The only one I can really think of that really had that feel in recent memory was definitely Gundam X, and we all know how that turned out. Well, I guess we don't all know how that turned out. For those of you who don't know, Gundam X got canceled early, and if you juxtapose Gundam 00 against Iron-Blooded Orphans, then you kind of get a weird sort of very clean and very polished look to the show, contrasted with the way Iron-Blooded Orphans looks, which is definitely like the Gundam barely has any damn armor on it. It's almost a frame walking around with a giant club for the majority of the, not the majority, but at least for a good chunk of that first season. Like that's damn near unprecedented. They are really branching out with Iron-Blooded Orphans, and for all of the complaints that you could probably really readily make about it, I gotta say, it's really coming. It really came into its own as the season wore on. You just kind of have to let it keep going and let it run its course before you can make a full judgment on it. And as it continues to go on, I gotta say, y'all need to keep with it. It gets it gets better, and it does get better, and it continues to be good, and that's great. And I'll say it before, and I will say it again, that the worst Gundam show, with the exception of Gundam Seed Destiny, which is absolutely atrocious, like some of the worst Gundam shows are by and large better than half the crap that comes out in any given year. So if I say that a Gundam series isn't all that great, I am only comparing it to other Gundam shows. And Iron-Blooded Orphans is not... It's not one of the worst. I wouldn't say it's one of the best, but it's definitely better than the bad ones. And that makes it head and shoulders above other shows that came out this year. So, fucking go watch it, damn it. This is going to sound silly to you, but I really enjoyed Space Patrol Luluco. It's got that really rapid-fire brand of humor that I wish I was good enough to pull off. and it's short enough to be really palatable and not a huge time investment. It's not TQ levels of short, but it's also not TQ levels of crappy. Intentionally crappy in TQ's case. Uh, there were a lot of really short ass shows that came out this year, or maybe we're just getting more exposed to them, of course. Space Patrol Luluco sat in a very interesting space for me because I could turn it on, I could watch it, and I could forget what happened, and then I'd watch it again the next week and be like, oh, right, this happened. But it made so little of an impact, and yet when I got to the end of the show, I was still really invested. Like, it's a show that is not intrusive, but it is a show that also managed to feel like it matters. I know that doesn't sound like. I know that sounds probably like Damned by Faint Praise, but this full. I know that probably sounds like Damned by Faint Praise, but Studio Trigger really put together something that's interesting to watch and fun to watch without taking up too much of your time, which is kind of something that they needed to get fucking going. And they really needed to work on that with some of their other shows that came out recently. Kisniver, I'm looking at you. It doesn't take itself seriously, and that's its biggest strength, because when it does get serious, it's always kind of a little silly, but that's what makes it enjoyable. Other shows that Studio Trigger has done recently are a little bit too heavy-handed for my tastes, and Luluco is not, and that makes it wonderful. They just kind of let themselves go off the rails and throw whatever they want on screen, and there's this generalized feeling of being very free to do so that comes with that, and I think that makes a big difference in how enjoyable a show is. Alright, next on the list is Drifters. Now, I'm a huge history nerd. It's what I got my degree in. So obviously a show in which everybody and their brother is a historical figure of some sort, especially Japanese historical figures who I all know anyway. I don't really know if I don't really rate Hellsing that high on the old action meter. Yeah, I guess it's good, and it has some cool imagery to it, but I really felt that Kota Arano was being constrained by the limits of what he really had to work with, and as Drifters went on, the more I felt like he was not being constrained by those same constraints. Whatever was tying him down to the way Hellsing played out is not present in Drifters. He can just do whatever he damn well pleases, and if he wants to put Hitler and Jesus and all these samurai in, fucking crazy ass fighter pilot and Billy the Kid and all these guys in a show and just kind of shake the bottle, then yeah, no, he's gonna do it, and it's gonna be badass. The finale of this season is spectacular because we finally get to watch Toyohisa, the main character, go up against somebody who's actually on his level, because he has been kicking the shit out of everybody and anybody in his way up until this point. And now he's fighting somebody who's on his level, who is also superpowered because he's an end and not just a drifter. So, aw shit, son, it gets real, real. I love Shimazu Toyohisa. He is fucking amazing as a character in this. And one of the things that I keep saying to myself every time I watch him fight, when he swings his sword, he is not cutting people. He is pulverizing them. He has an edged weapon that he is basically using like a hammer. And yeah, it cuts just fine, but the sheer amount of force that is clearly behind these blows is astronomical. This show has a lot of very disparate elements, and those are hard to get to work together. But through either hook, crook, or actual talent, lo and behold, Kota Hirano has produced something that I find great. I think it's amazing, and you are missing out if you're not watching it. Speaking of shows that shouldn't be missed, Kiss Him, Not Me. Now, there have been shows like this in the past, like Comic Party and mostly Comic Party, Genshiken, say Princess Jellyfish to an extent, but not like in reverse almost. So here's the thing. Kaie is a Fujoshi of the most Fujoshiest variety, and she is not a slender woman, that's for certain. So the old trope was like, oh, she was actually beautiful the whole time, kind of comes into play, but I don't know. So she's a big girl. Oh, she's a big girl, and she gets real depressed when one of her favorite characters dies, and without any real concern for what happens to a human body when it loses a whole lot of weight, she suddenly wakes up one morning after going on a crying binge for literally a week. If I'm not forgetting what happens, but she's like, oh shit, none of my clothes fit. Oh, look at me, I'm pretty now. And I can hear you face palming from here. And because she's suddenly not drawn like a fucking monstrosity, she's suddenly surrounded on all sides by men who want to court her because they're disgusting and shallow. Most of the guys in this show, I believe, can well and truly fuck off. But there are two characters that redeem it for me. I think Kai's adorable because she's just such a Fujo, and it's great. But that being the case, she's surrounded by dudes who want to sleep with her or get with her or whatever it is that Japanese people do. Because obviously they're not fucking. Point being, she's like, oh, I'm pretty now. Oh god, all these guys want to get with me. Oh wait, I'm still a giant Fujo. So that's where the main conceit of the show is. It's these guys trying to balance out her trying to balance out the fact that she's just this massive otaku, and them trying to come to grips with the facts that they are into her, but she is very weird. But there are two characters, Mutsumi and Shima-chan. That's not her full name. Nishina-chan is her. Whatever. Doesn't matter. So, Mutsume actually gives a fuck about her as a human being, and Nishina is the token lesbian in this case. Lesbian, bisexual, who knows, whatever. And Nishina actually seems to care about her as a person, and they're not just this real awkward, shallow relationship. Like, it's like, oh, hey, they get along together, and they're affectionate to each other, and they actually seem to just care about each other legitimately. And Mutsume seems to be very protective and care about Kai's well-being, while the others are just like, she's pretty, me want. Now, if they have some sort of redeeming qualities to them later on in the series, or later on in the manga, because the series is only 13 episodes to date. 13, 12? It's a season. It's only one season long to date. If they get better, then great. If they do not, I will be fairly satisfied with the way the manga carries on and the way that the show ends. But it's that kind of interesting comedy that stems from the fact that, man, Fujoshi and otaku are not, they do not fit in with normal society at all in the Japanese context, and that's where most of the comedy is. But it never feels like it's really judging, like Kai or Shima to an extent, for being what they are. The feeling that I get out of it, for the most part, is that they're actually kind of judging the bevy of handsome boys for being just kind of shitty. And I don't think we get that enough of a, or at least not in the shows that I see a lot. That I don't think we get that kind of critique of their existence, of the Japanese truth, justice, in the Japanese way sort of thing. But it might be my limited scope and perspective too. I don't know. It appeals to me as a Westerner. Next up on the list, Oji-san and Marshmallow. This is a comical and wholly inoffensive little weird romance. I don't really... You can watch through the damn show in about, in a couple hours, and it has the weird kind of pacing like TQ, and it does the fun things like some of these other shows that I've brought up. Like, it's not an action show, it's just a weird romance, maybe? This office lady is really... I don't know why she's in love with this old fat dude, but it's hilarious to watch her try and hit on this dude who is so abundantly, disgustingly clueless. But I can't help but love it for being just peculiar. And that's really all that needs to be said about Oji-san and Marshmallow, because it's good, goofy ass fun. And I don't know if there's really any way you can explain it other than telling somebody to just watch this show. They have all these weird, bizarre characters. This part in particular that I'm thinking of, where they get caught on the way home, or on the way to work in the rain. This office lady and her boss, I guess it's her boss, direct superior, somebody who works above her. Like, oh hey, we gotta hang out here for a while, and he calls his boss up on the phone, and he's like, hey shit, we're stuck, we're letting ourselves dry out a little bit, and so the girl like starts making noises like she's getting fucked in the background. And it's just the most awkward, terrible thing to happen to this poor upstanding Japanese businessman, where she's just like, I mean, she's not even making like really sexy moans. She's just like, the whole time. It's just like, what? That's mean, but it's comical, and it sends the boss, like the big boss, into like complete tizzies just thinking about these two going at it. It's just like, I don't know. It struck a weird absurdist chord with me, and if you have absurdist chords in you too, then Purple Octopus Baseball Bat. Second to last from the list is Gakuen Handsome, which is just like, it's everything that is wrong with stuff that you created while you were in, I don't know, like seventh or eighth grade, but on the big screen, which is, I mean, it's all cringy, because you know exactly the thought processes that were going on behind it, but at the same point, it's not cringy enough to make me want to fucking blow my own dick off. But at the same time, it's just like, oh no. And I will say this, if that show was any longer than 2 minutes, it would be absolutely unwatchable. But because it's just little bite-sized chunks, especially if you're watching it week to week, then it is 2 minutes of complete flashbacks to who you were in high school, basically. Um, the animation looks like ass, and it's brilliant. Um, and of particular, not awesomeness, but particularly interestingness, and of a particular interest is the end credits, where they just I, they take the character models who are in essentially T poses and forcibly bend the images to make it look like they're moving, but they just take it so far beyond the realm of human motion that it becomes unintentionally, intentionally hilarious, but like they turn these poor characters into these horrible monstrosities. And I appreciate this as somebody who's into animation, but obviously I don't really appreciate it as somebody who's into good storytelling. But it's just one of those things that you have to appreciate because it's just taking the piss out of the genre. And with so many, it's hard to do that right. It's hard to do that in a comical manner that isn't just, hey, look at this thing. And to do it in a, from the show perspective, a completely po-faced way is great. And you run the risk of hitting that same problem that Power Rangers fan film that was super dark and violent came up with. But if you do it like Gaku and Handsome did in this case, and just make it the thing you're trying to make fun of, and just kind of letting it speak for itself, then it works out pretty alright. And of course, it gets more and more absurd as it goes. Like, this short shows, like the 2-minute comedy shows that have been coming up lately have been pretty good on the whole, like TQ, like Gaku and Handsome, like a couple other. I brought up another one earlier on. I don't know what it is. That that show that takes place in the Sengoku era. That one too. Like, that was pretty good though. Like, you can only watch so many of those. Like, kind of binge watch so many of those before your brain don't work no good anymore. But yeah, those are always good for a laugh and for very specific reasons that bounce around from show to show. But I'll probably be catching up with them as they go. Finally, last on the list, I guess that actually makes it 10, doesn't it? Macross Delta. Now here's the thing: when a Macross show is on TV, you fucking watch it. You figure out a way to watch it, and you fucking watch it. All right. Here's the thing about Macross that makes it matter to me every time it's on. And it's taking the piss out of everything that is happening in anime right now. Now, idol things, like idol shows, are really big right now. And so what does Macross do? Macross Delta is about a group of idols who are there using their idolness to pilot robots and beat up monsters. And does that make a whole lot of sense? Not really. In the context of the show, actually, yeah, a little bit. And especially since, like Macross Frontier was really sticking it to disposable idol culture and not disposable, but the fact that Cheryl Nome, as a curvaceous, long-haired blonde woman, who is still a great singer, as voiced by Maya Sakamoto, is on the way out, and this fucking pedobait character, I exaggerate a little bit, Ronka Lee is not a bad character, but she is also very much the moe loli waifu bullshit sort of character, who, I mean, she's not. Never in my life have I found Ronka Lee sexy. Anyway, the point being, like that's the point that they're not the point they're trying to make, but the overarching that's the overall that's the overall idea that they're trying to poke fun at or at least poke holes in. And that matters and that's important. And so what Macross Delta does is take that same idea that, oh shit, there's actually still a war going on and we have to go and fight the monsters. Uh, the their overarching thing is let's kind of poke fun at this weird idols who can do anything sort of mentality, and then let's throw them into an actual war zone and their their idol status and their singing because as always in Macross, and this is the important thing to remember about Macross, is that music can and will save the world, right? So literally again, music is saving the world and saving culture. The culture. And that's the basic conceit of Macross Delta as well. But there's also the horrific, like there's also the juxtaposition of these cutesy bootsy characters that almost seem like they're from a different show entirely, which is kind of the point also. Being juxtaposed against these huge war scenes, people getting killed and destroyed physically in just awful and horrible ways, and how that juxtaposition and how putting these against each other, these disparate elements, how they work together and come into a good show, because it's Macross, and when Macross is on TV, you goddamn watch it. Anyway, that brings me through the top 10, now that I look at what's on the list. Anime that I actively watched and actively enjoyed over the course of the last year, and y'all should go at least try these shows. Most of them are on Crunchyroll. Some of them might require a little bit of finagling to find, and so help me God, if I find out you were watching it on Kiss Anime, I will come to your house and slap you. Now, you may disagree with me, and that's what the comments section is for, and know full well that I will probably make fun of you if you bring up whatever dumbass idol show or dumb shonen ass show that came out this year that I didn't watch and didn't care about into the comments. I should also note that I did watch through all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, and I enjoyed it, but I won't put it on any top 10 lists because I won't put it on any yearly top 10 list because that's like putting Naruto on a top 10 list of the year. It's a continuation, it's a continuing story, and it's been going for years now. So I don't really feel right about putting it on there. Though I may change my mind once I figure out what season 5 or series 5 is for that, and how that works into the top 10, or how that works into the canon. But that's a thought for another day. So, until next time, this is Professor Otaku signing off.